Hello, guys. Welcome to yet another episode. I've been talking offline a second ago. Um, Welcome to another episode, guys. We're going to be talking about the call out from Covington regarding Makhachev. That's very interesting. I mean, I like to break down fights, so I like to break down this fight, which is probably not going to happen because he has to get through Edwards, which I don't necessarily think he will. I think Edwards is going to stop Covington by cut, if you want me to be honest. I think he's going to hit him with a left elbow that he likes to throw and cut Covington, and this fight with Makhachev will never happen. I don't know that Makhachev will necessarily get through Oliveira. We did a breakdown before. The breakdown's already up. I don't know that he necessarily gets through him. So who knows? But I do enjoy breaking these fights down, and I do enjoy the fact that Makhachev is going to fight on the weekend. We've already broken down his fight with Charles, so looking a little further into what he's capable of is interesting to me. We have with us the mathematician, the beautiful mind, the runner-up for the Fields Medal, Mr. Sam. Sam, how are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Obviously, guys, this fight isn't necessarily going to happen, but if it does happen, it's super interesting. So hit me. Sammy, let's go.
If you just share your screen there too. Yeah, there we go. So we've got Islam on the left and Colby on the right-hand side. And we're just looking at average per round and that in that chart in the middle. But obviously just overall, Colby's had a couple more losses in his UFC history than Islam has as well. Did you want to speak to that before?
I think there's a few things that I would probably speak on. Now, Nathan, how are you? Oliver Ekman, the champion of all champions. And then we have Nathan Gorman. Makhachev's judo, sambo, and submission ability will be a problem for Colby's American-style wrestling. Plus, he has no submission ability. It's a bad matchup for Colby. That's actually not true, my friend, but I do appreciate your opinion because Colby Covington's grappling, he's actually a world champion in grappling at the filler 77 kilograms no-gi grappling world championships in 2013. He won a gold medal. He's also a National Collegiate Athletic Association, NCAA Division I All-American, Pac-10 174 conference champion out of Oregon State. Then he was also a National Junior College champion. He was 165-pound national championship out of Iowa Central Community College, and also that was in 2007, and also an All-American in the same year. So, he's a pretty big-time grappler. He's about as big-time grappler as you're going to get coming out of that style. That isn't to say necessarily that I think he's a better wrestler or a better grappler than Islam. I don't necessarily think that. I think Islam is very, very accomplished, of course, in his own rights. He's a 2016 combat world champion in Sambo at under 74 kilos, which is also interesting. And so I don't, and if you saw in the fight with Volkanovski, Islam didn't have it all his way in the grappling department. So it's just I think it makes it a very, very interesting, matchup. And sorry, Nathan, I don't mean you're wrong. I shouldn't have said it like that, Nathan. I apologize for that. You're not wrong. That's your opinion, and it's a fair opinion, and that's what makes it interesting. So I apologize for that if it came across a little bit rude, because that wasn't what I was intending to do. But I do think that people overlook Colby's grappling a fair bit. That's one of the things I think that makes this particular fight interesting. It's that I don't know that Islam can keep Colby off him necessarily. And we were looking at it earlier. I don't know if I look at the matchups that Islam has had, for example, there's no one there that I would think. Sarukian would probably give Colby a hard time, yes. Maybe Charles Oliveira, yes. I can see them giving him a hard time. Volkanovski's a fair bit smaller. He's another weight division down, but if you were be able to make Volkanovski bigger, he'd definitely give Colby a hard time as well. Big fan of Dan Hooker, but I do think that Colby would just out-grapple Dan Hooker, I do think that he would be able to do that. But then having said that, on the flip side of it, if I was to look at everyone else that he has fought, I don't think that Colby has fought. I don't think anyone other than Kamaru Usman would give Islam a really hard time. I don't see at the time that he fought them too. You know what I mean? Because one of the points that Sam brought up off camera is that when he fought Damian Maia and Rafael dos Anjos and Robbie Lawler, Tyron Woodley, they were all pretty much more or less past it, you know? So at the time that these fights had happened, I don't think that these guys would have given Islam the same run that they probably would have in their prime. That's some of the things I think that make this fight really, really interesting. Madara says, how would Islam deal with the Colby pressure, wrestling, and striking? Would Khabib be the perfect sparring partner? That's what I find interesting. I think that that's what makes this fight really, really interesting, is because that forward pressure of Colby, and as you see, look, Islam doesn't like going backwards. You know, he doesn't like coming backwards. He likes going forward and pressuring. So and one of the big things in his striking is his kick, that left kick that he throws, and I think that that's going to be hard for him to throw against someone like Colby that's coming forward and pressuring. I think the tidiest stand up of the two is definitely Islam, but some pressure there from Colby that would be very difficult to deal with. Would Khabib be the perfect sparring partner? I don't know. I don't know that Khabib would be the perfect sparring partner, because the grappling is very different that they do, you know. So he'd definitely be a fantastic sparring partner. I don't know if he'd be the perfect one. Mario Gomez says Islam had problems with Volks because he was small, thus making it hard to take down and submit. I don't think he will have those problems with Colby. Thoughts? The stature and the strength of Volkanovski, and I know Volkanovski personally, is something that if you're not used to training with someone like that, that has the striking ability that Alex has, and the grappling, he's a good grappler, it's going to be problems, yes. But Colby's grappling is, before I say this, just make sure, but there's no one on here that I'm looking at that has that grappling pedigree. He hasn't, other than maybe Sarukian, and Sarukian gave Islam problems. I don't see anyone that Islam's fought that you could say has the same grappling credentials as Colby. Not close. Not Alex either, you know. So that's where I think that would be a big problem for him. And he's bigger too. He's not a light. Colby's not making lightweight. Like, I've met him personally as well. Like, he's not a little guy. Like, the narrative is that he's like this little welterweight that's walking around, and he's not. He's not at all. How much of Volkanovski getting tired in round 5 versus... how much of Makhachev getting tired in round 5 versus Volk was down to the lack of time to rehydrate or Volk's pressure? If it's Volk's pressure, then Colby would outpace Makhachev 5 rounds. That's an interesting one. I don't know. I don't know how much it affected Makhachev, the travel. I do know that for people that don't do the flight, like Australians, we take it for granted because we have to travel anywhere. If you go, I'm going to Sweden for a holiday, as you will know, Sam, you just came back from Sweden. It takes like days off your life, dude, if you're an Australian, to travel somewhere. Like, it really, really does. And that's you not even competing, just you trying to recover from you, just so you can go skiing or hang out with your friends. It takes its toll. Whenever I've worked with athletes, we always go at least 2 weeks before to acclimate on that. If you're not used to that, you know, how much Australia can affect you with the jet lag and everything, especially Perth, which is I think pretty much is the most isolated major city in the world. It could have had a factor with Volkanovski, or it could be just a fact that Volkanovski's a monster, or it could be both. You know, two things can be true at once. So yeah, like you got to, but again, I don't know with Makhachev and Colby with the age too, because Colby's getting up there. Will Colby be able to still put that pressure on Makhachev at, now he's 35 years old? I don't know, probably. And then Death Note says, why is Colby calling out Islam? Shouldn't he be fighting Bilal Muhammad? If he beats Leon in December, he criticized Islam fighting a weight class down, but then calls out a 55er himself. It's interesting. I think Colby says and does a lot of interesting things, but I think that I actually am more interested in Makhachev versus Colby, especially with the implications of Makhachev, if he beats Oliveira being a double champ, than him fighting Bilal Muhammad. Nothing against Bilal Muhammad. Sorry, Sammy, I'm just answering a few of these things. Jordan Martinez says, did Gamrot's wrestling takedown intensity with his good striking versus fierce interest you more for the future Islam fight? Yeah, look, I think obviously the fight didn't go it didn't go the distance, and Fiziev looked about as good as I've seen him, but Gamrot seemed to me to really be in there. He did get Fiziev down, in that first round, and he did pressure him a lot in the second round, and it looked like he was and my prediction with that was whoever was going to be able to gain the momentum in that fight. And whilst not much happened in the first round other than the late takedown by Gamrot, I do believe that it was slowly starting to create momentum in Gamrot's favor. And I don't think that unless Fiziev caught him with something, he was going to come back from that. That's just what I see. I don't think that Gamrot has the striking if he can't apply the wrestling to Islam. And I think it's going to be hard to apply that wrestling to Islam without some decent striking. Oliver Ekman says, do you see Islam ever going up? Possibly. Max Jamil says, Islam and Colby are both southpaws, so how would the striking stand-up go? Islam also has a good body kick, but so does Colby. I think, like I said earlier, I think that Islam's striking is tidier, but I think that Colby can take a shot. He got to give him that. He can take a shot. And at the same time, he pressures going forward, which makes it harder for Islam to get the kickoff, which is big part. That's probably Islam's best weapon in the stand-up department is that kick. And he throws it with little to no tell, which is pretty rare for guys that are grapple heavy the way that he is. Sammy, let's talk some stats.
Yeah, so just comparing the two and just their overall performance per round in the UFC. So just the UFC stats. And it's probably worth noting too that Makhachev's loss that he has on his UFC career was back in 2015, whereas Colby's, the last two losses were both to Usman in 2021 and 2019. So he's, if that is an effect of getting a bit older as well. If you look at their striking and that as well, an average per round. So Colby has nearly double the significant strikes per landed per round than Islam does. So he's landing at 19 strikes per round to Islam's 10. And then he has and then double the amount of head strikes as well. So he's striking to the head at almost 14 head strikes per round compared to Islam's 7. Similar body strikes with Colby having a slight edge in average per round. So he's averaging 3 per round, whereas Islam's averaging slightly less with 2.76. Colby has 6 times the average leg strikes in Islam per round as well.
So would you say it's fair to, that overall, statistically at least, Colby's a much busier fighter on the feet?
Yeah, definitely on the feet, he's much busier. So even if you look at strikes landed from distance, Colby's landing 15 average per round, whereas Islam's only landing 5. In the clinch, they're very similar. So they're both landing, about 2 per round as well. When it does go to ground, Islam does have a slight edge. So he's landing 2.9 or so per round, whereas Colby's only landing 2. Those are also, and we said this last week as well, in the clinch and in the body, how they're recorded from the UFC is that they have to be clean strikes. They can't be kind of landing on the gloves or anything else in order for them to be recorded. But definitely stand up from distance. Colby has that definitive edge. He lands about 3 times as many strikes from when they're standing up as well than Islam does.
Yeah, I think that kind of pressure is very difficult to deal with. I don't know that's tough to deal with. Like a guy that's going to come forward, throw volume at you, and also to be trying to grapple you at the same time. This is difficult, and that's going to be at least in there is going to be at least the same size, if not bigger than you. So they're the things that are going to be, I think, difficult. And he's got an amazing gas tank. Does Colby? You again can't take that from him. He can come forward. He can stand. He's busy. Where I think the problems could start to arise for Colby is in the fact that Islam's stand-up is actually, in my opinion, tidier. He throws nice straight punches. He's surprised me, to be honest with you. Like, every time I think that Islam will get outstruck, and he could still get outstruck, don't get me wrong. He's been knocked out by Adriano Martins. But the way that he fought Volkanovski, for example, I honestly thought Volkanovski was going to piece him up on the feet. Volkanovski still did really well. I'm biased, man. I'm going for fucking Volkanovski. But he surprised me, man. And the difference with that, I can tell you, is because when I'm watching the fight, I'm going for Volkanovski, and so I'm looking at the fight like this, because I'm seeing Islam landing some big shots on Volkanovski, and obviously Volkanovski landed a big shots on Islam and dropped him in that 5th round. But still, I thought if Islam has trouble getting Volks down, Volkanovski is going to smash him or at least piece him up, and he wasn't able to do that. And whilst he had trouble taking Volkanovski down, he still got Volkanovski down and still got superior position on him on the ground when he did. So that impressed me a lot about Makhachev, to be honest with you. In that particular fight, I feel like both their stocks went up, in my opinion, because I know how tough Volkanovski is. Charles Oliveira, on the other hand, I thought that Charles' stand-up would be better than Islam's. And it was, and again, I mean, Charles hits hard and he could win this next fight for sure. But again, it surprised me how tidy he was with his stand-up. It really, really did. And so that's a part that I think can start to give Colby problems, in that the stand-up is tidier. That's my opinion on that. Do you want to go to another slide, or do you want to talk about other things on this, Sam?
There was just one or two other things on this. I thought for the grappling part as well, I think it's worth noting too, like I said, Colby has a higher average takedowns per round than Islam. So he has 1.26 average takedowns per round compared to Islam's, like, it's slightly above, where he has 0.94. But it's also worth noting that, yes, while he has higher takedown and lands higher, at a higher rate, Islam also has more strikes on the ground. So it also means that Colby, like, Islam has a better ability to kind of solidify that on the ground as well. He doesn't have to, they don't get back up and then he has to go and take them down again.
So I think that's twofold. I think one of the things that Islam does, he actively goes for submissions. So he takes people down, solidifies a position, like you said, and then he goes for submissions. Like, he sets up submissions, and he definitely has more submission wins than Colby. That's for sure. Am I correct with that? And and so then the other thing I was going to say with that, but I also feel that Colby in his wrestling, the way that he puts his wrestling into the fight is basically makes it a collegiate wrestling match, which is really difficult. If you don't train that style of wrestling, it's really, really difficult, like, to fight like that. He really drags you into that. He basically makes it a folk style wrestling match. So he takes you down, he gets you escape, you get to your feet, and he drags you back down to the ground, which is basically folk style. And that's a style that he's been doing ever since he's young. And if anyone that's trained, like, for yourself, Sam, you've been training now jiu-jitsu for a couple of years, but when you start wrestling and you stand up and go down, that gasses you out really, really quickly if you're not used to doing it. Now, all these guys would train this, but it's not the same. If this is the style that you've been doing forever as a little kid, it's going to be really, really difficult to keep up with someone like Colby. And most of the guys he fought aren't that style of wrestler. They're not collegiate wrestlers. And so it makes it really, really difficult. He takes you down, you work your way up to your feet, and then he takes you back down again. Not only is he fit and has good endurance, but if you're not used to fighting that style, you can't fight that style and you get very, very tired very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. If you'd like to go on, Semi.
Just with your comment around submission attempts, on average per round, Islam has about a 5 times higher rate of submission attempts than Colby does as well.
Right. I didn't think it was that much. Jesus. And the finishes by submission?
Yeah, so if you look at submissions overall, Islam's up there with the best of them, I suppose. He's got, 6 submission wins. Arm triangles, rear naked chokes, arm bars, and a Kimura, whereas Colby has 2 rear naked chokes.
Which is the most common of submissions to do. I think that also shows like the vocabulary of submissions that Islam has. But between these two guys, the real battle is just going to be for position. And I don't know who's going to be able to get that position. I honestly tend to think that a lot of this fight will play out on its feet. And I think that the way that Colby attacks takedowns, it'll be probably Colby getting the takedown. So it'll be interesting. It'll be a really, really interesting fight. I would love to see it. What's on the next slide, Semi?
So just comparing them side by side, but then also by round to kind of see how they eventuate over the entire fight. So in those first 3 rounds, Islam on the left there, he's the first round he's scoring 10 significant strikes, second round 12, and then third round back to 11. But he does have higher strikes then on the ground as well. So he's obviously gone to ground then too. Whereas Colby on the right-hand side, he starts off with 14 in the first round. So he has higher significant strikes in that first round. Then he increases it again to 21 and then back to 18. So he's got much higher significant strikes as the round progresses. And most of those are again from standing as well. So he's doubling the strikes from distance and standing strikes than Islam does on average in those first 3 rounds at least.
Light Yagami says, Colby's pressure is unreal, but Islam's left straight counter against Charles and Alex was nice. I can see him tagging Colby as he seeks to close the distance. I definitely think he could tag Colby. The thing is that Colby takes a shot really well. He really does take a shot well. Matt says, Colby also has a hell of a chin. When Usman hits you so hard, your jaw breaks, but you don't go out, and George gets a free cheap shot at you on the street and you don't go out, you got a chin. Now, he's definitely got a chin, man. He takes a shot. He takes a shot super well, Can Islam catch him? Can Islam catch him? Yeah, sure, Islam can catch him. I don't know. I don't know that'll be enough to put him out. Do you know what I mean? I don't know this, I think that Colby's got one of those things. Like, I'm not even like a Colby fan necessarily or not, but Colby's got one of those things where his personality may be abrasive. He may not like what he says. People might not necessarily like him. I'm not getting into the, he's a good guy, he's a bad guy, whatever. I don't really care. I'm just talking about his fighting ability. And I think it's kind of like with Strickland where people forget, no, these dudes can actually fight. Like, he can actually fight. And Colby is about as highly credentialed a grappler as you're going to get coming into the UFC. He was very highly credentialed. Now, the people are going to say, no, he's not. Bo Nickal's a high credential. Yeah, I'm not saying he's the highest we've ever seen. I'm just saying he's very, very highly credentialed grappler, and he's got a good chin. So this is what, to me, makes this fight so compelling and interesting. And I'm glad that Colby called Islam out. I don't know, man. I don't know that they get through the people that they have to fight. I don't think that's a foregone conclusion. I don't see Charles being an easy fight for Islam. I really don't. I think that people forget, even in that fight that with Charles and Islam, the way that it played out, Charles still had his moments. There were still moments that Charles had that could have gone different ways, Charles showed a lot of good things as well in that fight. His ability to wrestle up, That was really, really cool, the way he threw out the leg lock and managed to wrestle up. He did some good things. He got some good up kicks going. His guard was active from the bottom. So it's going to be interesting to see what adjustments he makes leading into this fight. Yeah, so that's me. Matt says, fan of the fighter in the cage, couldn't care less about them outside. Yeah, to be honest with you, you don't know them. You know what I mean? We don't know. You don't know the guy. So let's see what happens. So he's 35, like he's 35 himself. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Reem Raw says, Colby doesn't beat champions. He beats 37-year-old retired fighters. In fairness to Colby, though, you are right. He does fight some guys that are, like most of the guys he's fought were a bit past it. But he does have two very good fights with Kamaru. You know, Kamaru won him, but he did give Kamaru a good run, you know. So I have to say he's a very good fighter. You know, he's not an easy fight for anyone. Guys, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe and share the video, please. I would be very, very happy if you could do that. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. G. Kofi says, Islam would whoop Colby. I have to say to you, I don't know that he would, mate. I don't know that he would. I'd be going for Islam. I like Islam, but I don't know that he'd whoop Colby, even if he beats him. Sammy?
No, I was just pulling up the last Usman and Colby fight. So you can see on the left there, that's the offense that Colby threw in comparison to what he's kind of thrown in the past round by round. So he had slightly higher than average strikes from distance in the first round, but his actual significant strikes landed was slightly below what he normally lands, and it was consistent like that for the rest of the fight as well. In round 3, he did pick it up a little bit, but yeah, the first 2 rounds he was well below his average, and then he was hit a lot more than he normally gets hit. So in the first round, he was hit, there were 17 strikes that were landed by Usman, and usually, is about 10 or 11 on average, with 15 of those from distance, so, and 12 of those straight to the head of Colby from Usman. And then in that second round, it really picked up then as well. So Usman landed 36, which is well above the average that most people land on Colby in that second round, and it was like really nearly double what Colby landed on Usman in that second round as well.
I guess that kind of allows me to segue to here. Ofon asks a question. He says, do you see Colby beating Edwards? To be honest, I think Edwards will deal with him fairly safely. Yeah, I do too, because Edwards has very underrated grappling game. Like I picked Edwards to beat Usman, but I picked him to beat Usman the way he won the second fight, not the way he won the first fight. The only problem, though, for the first fight, why I didn't think he would beat Usman, was because it was at altitude. And Usman trains at altitude, and I knew that Edwards wouldn't be ready for that kind of altitude. But sea level Edwards, I do believe would beat Usman, and he did. And I think it'll be more or less the same thing, Edwards versus Colby. I think that Colby, like I said earlier, I think that Colby cuts him, to be honest with you. Hits him with an elbow in one of the exchanges and cuts him, and probably finishes the fight with a cut, or just messes him up with a cut that affects the rest of the fight. That's what I see happening. I do see Colby just strike. Oh, Edwards a big boy too, man. He's not little. He's a big guy, and he's a very good grappler with very, very good striking. So I see him busting up Colby at some point. Why I say it's pertinent what Sammy was saying was just the amount of times that Usman hit Colby, and Edwards is by far the better striker out of them. Matt says, it interests me how Benil had no grappling success against Oliveira. I would love to see Oliveira versus Burns when Burns was at 55. Yes, interesting. Because Benil is a very, very, very good grappler. Very good grappler. Gamrot struggled with Benil. Benil, I'm pretty sure, was Mundial's champion at brown belt. And I think the best burns by far is at 55, not at sorry. The best burns by far is at 170, not at 155. Like, he doesn't even look like the same person at 170 that he did at 155. Ofon says, yeah, Edwards a great defensive wrestler as shown in both matches. Yeah, but even if you watch his fight with what's that guy's name? The guy from Iceland. I'm a fan of his and I can't remember his name. What's that guy's name? Trains with Gunnar Nelson, right? When he fought Gunnar Nelson, you watch Edwards initiate takedowns, get control time. So he's very, very, very good grappler, man. Very good. Very, 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 very good grappler. So I don't think that he'll be able to have his way with Edwards like that. I don't think he'll be able to control Edwards, and I think Edwards is going to bust him up. That's my opinion. But yeah, C-level Edwards is the real thing, my friend. C-level Edwards is right up there with C-level Kane. It's for real. Ofon says, yep, Usman's known for being a giant, and Leon is only slightly smaller than Usman. Yeah. The other thing is Covington is not as small. Like the narrative is that Covington's small, but he's not a small guy, man. Like his frame, he's got like a big frame. I met him in real life. Like he's not a little guy like that. It's a different build. Whereas like, how do I say this to you? Like there's guys like you see Rockhold, he's big for middleweight, and then you saw him at light heavyweight with Jan. And whilst Jan and him may not have looked that much, Jan could fight at heavyweight. Do you get what I mean? And Rockhold can't fight at heavyweight. And the way that your bones are made, like you got bigger bones, you're just bigger framed guy. Blachowicz looked like a bigger guy, even though they weigh the same, because Rockhold was a big middleweight, but he wouldn't be a big light heavyweight. Israel Adesanya is the same thing. Israel's a big middleweight, wouldn't be a big light heavyweight, Pereira is different because Pereira wasn't a middleweight anymore. He had to cut down to fight that thing. He went middleweight in glory, light heavyweight in glory, middleweight, back to middleweight in the UFC. That's what makes that to me really, really interesting. Cooper Marion says, why was elevation Rockhold so much more fun than sea-level Rockhold? You know what Rockhold reminded me of in that fight against Costa at elevation? He just reminded me of like, those crazy old men, like the crazy old men that don't give a fuck. Like there was a guy that used to coach me in basketball when I was a kid, right? And his name's Ron Thomas. He used to run Valley Greens out of Green Valley. Shout out to Ron Thomas, man. You're a fucking champion. He's one of the good guys. And he was this crazy old dude that played first grade rugby league for St. George Dragons back in the day. And then him and his wife started coaching basketball. Helped a lot of young kids, man, in that area. It was a very, very like rough working class area, and they helped a lot of young kids. But Ron was like a crazy old dude that did not give a fuck. Like we grew up at the time, was like in the middle of heroin epidemic in Cabramatta, and this area was in Cabramatta, near Cabramatta. And you'd have like dudes that were full like bad, like Asian gang members and that. And like they'd threaten Ron, and Ron would just fucking spaz out, not give a shit. He was like an old guy, and he had like old man strength and wanted to fight dudes. And it was like, that is who Luke Rockhold reminded me of. He reminded me of Ron Thomas. Every time I was watching him, I was just thinking, fuck, this guy is just like a crazy old man trying to fight Costa for fucking sneaking into the basketball court and not paying his dues. So it was funny like that. Ofon says, kind of like Anthony Smith used to be at middleweight, and it's still a good size at light heavyweight. Yeah, but some people are. Like, I remember seeing Anthony Smith cutting weight for middleweight, and it didn't look right. He looked like he should be at light heavyweight. And another dude that used to cut weight was the Hammer, Thiago, the guy that fought John Jones. Fuck, I can't. The guy Thiago Santos, yeah, the guy that fought John Jones. I was in the lift once, and he was cutting down to middleweight, dude. And I looked over at him. I fucking no idea who he was. He looked like he was gonna fucking die when he was cutting to middleweight. When he went to light heavyweight, he was fine because that's what he should have actually been. Another guy that I remember this till the day I fucking die, James Vick, dude. That guy cutting down to lightweight. He was a really nice guy, and I remember I was with Rob, and he, for some reason, they were always matched, like, not always, but they were always matched on, or a lot of times matched on the same cards. A couple of times I think James might have been with fighters thing, and that. So we'd talk when we see each other, and he's actually a really lovely guy, but he was cutting weight, and he comes up to Rob and he goes, "Hey Rob, how are you?" And he had the hoodie on like this. He had a hoodie like this, so you couldn't really see him. And he goes, "Hey Rob, how are you? How you doing?" And Rob was polite to him, spoke to him, everything, and blah blah blah. And then he goes to me, he goes, "Who the fuck was that?" He goes, "What's wrong with him?" And I said to him, "Man, I'm pretty sure." I wasn't even fucking sure. He looked like he was a Grim Reaper, but it was James Vick, you know. So the fucking the weight cuts. He's another guy that would have probably done better at welterweight, you know. That's why it just depends, man. It's not just your how much you weigh, it's also your build, you know. Sorry, I went on a tangent about some people, but they just fucking, that's what made me think of it. So I'm going to skip a few people. Ophon says, "I'm thinking of Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino, except strong." That's who Ron Thomas was. Ophon, that's who Ron Thomas was, and that's who Rockhold reminded me of in that fight. MMA Mantra says, "Can you tell me what benefits Dagestani fighters get at Abu Dhabi? Because it seems very difficult to beat them in Abu Dhabi." Well, I think number one, from what I would honestly think, is like fighting at home has a lot of benefits, and if you're like, that's your home base or whatever, the familiarity of the city and all that kind of stuff is big, man. It's fucking big. And if you're not from Australia, then you're not used to flying everywhere. For us, it probably wouldn't make as big of a difference because we live in the arse end of the world as far as geography is concerned, and so it takes forever. But if you're from the US and you're used to fighting in Vegas, maybe you live, like, if you're from the US and you have to go from New York to Las Vegas, that might be one of the bigger trips. And then London is not really that far for the US, like to fly from New York to London, say. But if it's the first time you have to do one of those crazy ass flights, like to Abu Dhabi from the US, it will definitely affect you, man, because you're not used to having to give 2 weeks to get ready, like to be right, to acclimate. So that's number one. That's a big one, you know, like. And then if you know the city and you have familiarity, like real simple stuff, man, like where's the easiest supermarket to go to? What food can you get? Are you going to have the same food that you have at home, especially when you're rehydrating? What your hotel's going to look like, what your Airbnb might look like, so you can get your meals ready and all of that. If you're familiar with the city, this is way easier. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's like 10 or 20% of shit that you don't have to think about. That makes a massive difference. And then if you're from that city, you're going to be treated a different way than fighters from outside. So I think that's already a big one for them, you know, just being comfortable there. Cooper Marion says, "Crazy old man throwing tornado kicks and smearing blood on people." Yes, sir. Yes. Oliver Ekman says, "Hooker at featherweight." Dude, I was in the sauna with him, and he was cutting to featherweight, and I'm pretty sure it was his mum. Like I might have been his mum, or it might have been, she looked like him, and she was doing the thing with the credit card to take the sweat off him. And I was honestly fucking watching Hooker, because Hooker's a big boy, man. And I was thinking, like, first of all, you should have a parent or someone that loves you that much the way he does. Good for him, good for his fucking family. I'm glad for that. That's actually it's actually fucking super cool, man, to watch it, to be honest with you. But I was watching him just scrape the sweat off him with a credit card so that so he'd sweat more. and I was just. He's a big guy, man, making featherweight. It's not fuck, mate. It was a brutal cut. That was a brutal cut. Yeah, I don't like that. Ofon says that MMA mantra probably got to raise someone to play rugby and kind of fat at a young age before slimming down and be named after one of the greatest conquerors throughout history. I was talking about, is Volkanovski. Matt says the advantage they get in Abu Dhabi is they somehow lose 6 pounds in 20 minutes on their second weigh-in attempt. Now, Matt. Now. Cooper Marion says, my longest flight ever is 3 hours and I had to take an anxiety pill. Cooper Marion, 3 hours in Australia, you wouldn't even be out of this fucking state. Probably not. Would we be out of the state, Sam, in 3 hours? Like if you're flying across to, say, to Darwin, would we still be in New South Wales after 3 hours?
Oh, I've never flown to Darwin, but you'd definitely be able to get to Melbourne at least.
No, you could. If you fly south, yes, you'd get to Melbourne in an hour. But if you're flying to Darwin, you might still be in this state after about 2 hours at least. So now, for us, for Australians, 3 hours. Like if you're planning a trip somewhere, Sam, you like anywhere overseas, 3 hours is you're not out of the country. That's for sure.
It's 20 hours, or it's not worth it.
So I definitely think that. I definitely think if you haven't dealt with jet lag and you haven't dealt with flights and acclimating to a new city and a new culture and the food's different, the water's different. Here's another thing. There's things like dairy that might upset your stomach from another country. Just the bacteria is different and whatnot. Not always, but a lot of the times, yes. Like or the water. Some countries you can't drink the tap water. I'm not saying that that's the UAE, but in some countries you can't drink the tap water. It's not. There's a lot of simple things. Like you might have to brush your teeth. Like when we were with the national wrestling team, there were countries you have to go to and you have to brush your teeth with bottled water. And you're staying in a nice hotel. So all of these things matter, all of these things have, you have to take into account, especially if you're not used to it, man. You're not used to understanding that you need to give yourself 2 weeks if you're going to fly out there. That's one of the big ones. Sammy, what have we got here?
I was just going to ask, assuming they're not just flying economy like I am, or?
No, they're fucking flying economy, dude.
Fair enough.
They're flying, unless you're the champ. If you're the champ, you get one, you might fly business. But everyone else flies economy, and that's you being the champ, you know what I mean? And then you got to understand if you take over some sparring partners or whatever, and they've all flown economy, and your coaches have flown economy, they're all going to feel like shit as well, So it's not like you're still going to feel like shit anyways, you just might feel a little bit better. Sammy?
So here, I just wanted to match up. You kept referring to Leon Edwards and Colby as well, and obviously we'll do a further breakdown on this later in the year. But I just wanted to have a bit of a sneak peek. So on the left-hand side, you've got Edwards, and on the right-hand side, you've got Colby as well. So, and again, Colby has a significant advantage on the feet in terms of significant strikes landed in that first round. Yeah, even just strikes thrown and strikes landed. In total strikes, he's landed nearly double in the first 3 rounds in total strikes, but not all of them are considered significant. So Colby's still landed more significant strikes. He's landed 14 to Edwards 10 on average in the first round. Second round, again, 21 to 13. Third round, 18 to 15. So he does drop off a little bit in that third round, whereas Edwards builds, so he's got 10, 13, and 15, but still less than Colby as well.
I think the difference, though, is that Leon is by far the more dangerous striker. He is very much a sniper, and when he hits you, he picks his shots. Ofon says, is it just me or is the quality degrading on the text on the stream? It does look a little bit unclear. I thought it was just me. We will endeavor to address that, Ofon, for you. Oliver Ekman says, a flight from where I'm at to Melbourne is 23 hours and almost $5,000 round trip. 23 hour is the quickest. Yeah, it's far, man. Australia's far. I took a flight once, a direct flight from Dallas to Sydney, and it was 18 hours in that fart tube multicultural slave ship of a fucking aeroplane that I took. It was horrible. One of the worst flights in my life, man. It was 18 and a half hours or something on that. So that's that was that. The difference I think between these two is that whilst he's busier, Colby Covington's busier, I think that Edwards is just the much more efficient striker of the two, and he picks his shots. He's very precise. He's got really good movement, and his use of his left elbow to cut people is very, very good, and I think that's for sure going to come into play. Can you hear me, Sammy? Can everyone hear me? Because Beetlejuice says audio cut out, Playboy.
It's good.
Yes. Okay. Oliver Ekman says the audio is good. What's next, Sammy?
I was just going to say, just in your terms of his striking accuracy, Edwards does have an edge in striking accuracy. So significant strikes, his accuracy is about 53%, and Colby's is down to 39%. Head strikes in total. So this is like, for all his UFC career, Edwards has 42% head strike accuracy. Colby's a little bit less at 32. And then again, body, leg, strikes of the body and strikes of the legs as well. Edwards has better accuracy and distance as well. So just in that stand up, he has 48% accuracy to Colby's 35% accuracy as well.
Yeah, I think just the way that Edwards, the way that Edwards sets up strikes and he sets up traps and he lands really, really good shots. You know what I mean? He's a big dude too, long, knows how to use his length, knows how to use his range. He's a very good. He's a master striker. Very, very, very good striker. I like the way he fights. I think he'd beat Colby. That's my opinion on it. What do we have next?
If it loads. I was just going to pull up one of Colby's fights. If you wanted to have a look at that as well, just his last fight against Masvidal too. So in that, in total for the whole fight, Colby's landed much more. So significant strikes, he's landed 94 to Masvidal's 67. In total strikes as well. So total strikes, he attempted 338 and he's landed 218, but only under half of those that were considered significant by the UFC. So he's throwing
I think
a lot
there's
more.
A big difference. Yeah. Sorry, you're saying?
I was going to say he's throwing a lot more, but they just weren't considered significant as well.
Yeah, I think Masvidal, especially towards the tail end of his career, I don't think Masvidal would have beat. I don't think Masvidal would have beat Edwards. I just don't see it. And I think it wouldn't even go the way that people think it'd go. I think that Edwards would get him down on the ground as well. I think he'd take Masvidal down. Masvidal has generally struggled with people that are higher end wrestlers, and I think that that's the path that Edwards would take. Also, I think that he'd hurt Masvidal on the feet. To be honest with you, just a combination of it. And he's a big guy too. I think that would play against Masvidal in that fight. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just thinking about that fight with Masvidal and Edwards. I was just thinking about it then. I just don't think that on the feet, Masvidal is very good, but I just don't think on the feet he'd be able to really beat Edwards. And I think that Edwards would get him down on the ground as well. So yeah, Beetlejuice says, bro, I felt sorry for the plane the way my daughter was screaming, if I was Oprah, I would have bought everybody a car who was on that plane. Yeah, dude, mate. I don't want to. I took my kids, my two girls at the time. I have my son now, but at the time I took my two girls a 45-minute plane ride to Ballina from where we are. And in the week leading up to it, we had to keep doing like a rehearsal. Like we kept doing rehearsals for the fucking plane ride to make sure that they knew what was going to happen. But I wouldn't take them on anything further. So that's me. SG says, greetings, Fab. How are you, sir? Yep. So what else have we got here, Sammy?
I was just looking round by round. Just that last fight he had with Masvidal. So, Colby's in that first round, it looked, if you just look at significant strikes, they're relatively similar. He's got 7 compared to Masvidal 6, but he's scored 3 takedowns, and then he's controlled so much on the ground as well. So he's had 212 seconds of control time in that first round. Then when you move to the second round, it picks up a bit in terms of striking. Masvidal actually outstrikes in terms of total and significant strikes. He actually outstrikes Colby as well. But there's some control time, and that comes down to the clinch there as well. So Colby has 81 seconds and Masvidal only has 21, and that was really all of Masvidal's control time considered throughout the whole fight. In that third round, it kind of shifted then again. So Colby's gone back. He's had 21 significant strikes to Masvidal's 8, and most of those have been at the head. So he's landed 18 head strikes. Masvidal only landed 5, and he landed 3 leg strikes as well. There was 1 takedown in the third round by Colby, and then he's had 274 seconds of control time in that third round as well.
Yeah, I don't see Masvidal being able to keep a strong grappler off him, especially a strong grappler that can strike like Leon. It's an interesting thing here. Ofon says Masvidal reminds me of an incredible self-taught fighter, but Leon Edwards reminds me of some type of person who practiced kicks and strikes since he was like 10, as in Leon seems professionally trained. I think Masvidal has fantastic coaches around him and has had for a very, very long time. So they're both professionally trained. But I think the difference is in their approach. Like you can really see in Masvidal's approach, it's a very methodical approach to fighting. Not Masvidal, sorry, the Edwards. I don't know if I got the names mixed up. Edwards has a very methodical striking style, very like sniper kind of striking style. And Masvidal does too, but he's very savvy. He's very tricky in the way that he fights and even in the way he sets up traps. But Leon is very, very stingy with his shots, and when he throws them, he knows what he's throwing. We're going to start to wrap this up, guys. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe and share this with your friends. Sammy, what's your take on all of this with everything that we have?
So my take
you want to add?
Not really, but yeah, I think my take for Islam Colby, if it does eventuate and everything else, like you said, all the caveats you added before as well, they've got to get through each of their respective fights that are coming up. But I do have Islam winning over Colby, but might just be
you pick Islam.
I pick Islam.
I'm going to pick Colby if it happens at this juncture, without having seen Colby. You have to see Colby again and whatnot. But at this point, I would probably pick Colby, although I'm a huge fan of Islam, but I'd probably pick Colby at this stage. And then your picks for the weekend, which we will be doing a live companion. Your picks is for Edwards versus Islam versus Charles. Yeah.
I had Islam for that, and I had Chimaev over Costa.
Okay. Let me get this up 1 second. I just want to get the card up. Have you got the card there?
No.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'll get it up. Okay. I'm actually going to do picks, sometime later in the week. Like properly, I'm just going to do the picks. But right now, I'm just going to do a few quick picks, just for conversation's sake that we're having now. I'm going to go like this, just really quickly off the top of my head. I'm going to go with Magomedov over Bruno Silva. I'm going to go just this off the top of my head with people that I can think of. Imavov versus Aliskerov is I wish they didn't do that fight, to be honest with you. I wish they didn't do that fight. I feel like they're kind of killing off one of these contender guys, you know? Like, I think this is a really tough matchup for both of them. If Aliskerov can get him down, I think he'll do a good job of controlling Imavov, but I don't know that he's going to be able to do that. I think Imavov has learned a lot. He doesn't have the best fight IQ, but he's got the really, really good physical attributes to be a champion. Whether or not he improves his fight IQ remains to be seen. But if he has, and he did look like he'd improved a little bit against Curtis, I have to go with Imavov. Hamza Chimaev versus Costa, I go with Chimaev. And Islam versus Charles, man, I don't know. It's hard, man, because Charles is like a feast or famine guy that I always say he is. You know, he can come in there and start you, or he could lose quickly. So I can't pick that one. I'm going to go with Charles. My heart says Charles, and I trained with Charles, so I'll go with Charles. Anything else there?
No, that's it for me. Made my picks.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so much. I look forward to hearing from everyone. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And thank you very much, guys. Share it with your friends. And I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much, guys. Take care.